Welcome to our May edition of our Save Our Seas Distinguished Speaker Series. Starting up the season again, we have a great program lined up for tonight. First, I want to go over a few ground rules. First, I'd like to, of course, thank our sponsors, the Save Our Seas Foundation, for making this all possible. We have monthly events lined up all the way through November, usually the first Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. So if you're enjoying what you see here tonight, tune in for the rest of the events too. We have a lot of great programs coming up. Particularly excited about tonight because our guest has been here before. We'll get to that in just a second, but just a few ground rules for those of you who are new to this program or just a refresh. We're going to be hearing a presentation from our distinguished guests tonight. At any point, and then at the end, after the presentation, we'll have time for questions and answers, discussion. So at any point during the presentation, please put any questions that come to mind in the chat and keep your microphones muted. You can turn your cameras on and off as you feel comfortable, but we want to keep our microphones muted to focus our attention on our guests tonight. And again, put any questions you have throughout the presentation as things pop into your mind to the chat. We'll come back to them at the end after the presentation and ask. This is your chance to hear from fascinating researcher on the scene. So to introduce tonight's guest, I'm really excited about this. She was here 2 or 3 years ago to give a presentation, and we're glad to have her back. Our guest tonight is Janie Ray, who's the founder of BC Whales and has also done research for Save Our Seas Foundation. She studies, well, whales in British Columbia, and she is actually on location at one of her field sites right now near Vancouver Island in British Columbia in the Pacific Northwest. And for those of us here experiencing the heat and thunderstorms of South Florida right now, and maybe those of us who have spent time in the Pacific Northwest and know what we're missing, it's going to be nice to travel there tonight. So I'd like to welcome our guest tonight, Janie Ray. So Janie, welcome. And if you're ready, we'll turn it over to you, and we're going to hear about the research that she's doing out there with whales. And again, put any questions you have in the chat, and we'll come back around at the end for discussions. So take it away to Janie Ray.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to share my sound, and I'll get started. And I'll just make sure, oh, it's asking for a password. And play from start. All right, and I'm just going to move this here so I can see, at least look at you a little bit while I'm presenting. So yes, well, good late afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. I've really been looking forward to this all week to talk about whales with all of you. So yes, I am actually located right now at one of our field stations referred to as Orca Lab, which is close to Vancouver on Vancouver Island. And I'm going to be talking to you about the culture and acoustics of whales of the Great Bear region of British Columbia. And I thought I'd start with, let me just see this. I thought I'd start with just giving you a little bit of background on how we collect our data, and then I'll go right into the whale behavior, but just a little bit of background before that. So I thought I'd start with a little map here. And of course, this is British Columbia. And you see where this square is, that's where one of our research stations is located, which is called the Finn Island Research Station. And then the blue dot here is where I am right now, which is Orca Lab. And just so you can see what that looks like, you can see this island here. This is actually Finn Island. And this tiny little dot here is the station. And there's a larger picture of it. But what I really wanted to show you is how remote this island is. As you can see, there's no roads. We're completely off grid. Everything we need, we have to bring in by boat, including the materials to build the station. We're powered completely by solar. And the closest town is actually a 4-hour boat ride. So it truly is remote. But one of the reasons that we built in this core location is because from a land-based platform, we have really close access, especially to fin whales and to humpback whales. And you'll see that shortly. This is Orca Lab. So this is the station that I'm at right now as I'm speaking to you. And again, it's completely off grid, no roads. Everything has to come by boat, but it's not so isolated. We're only about 30 minutes away from town by boat, which makes life a little bit easier. And of course we do have Wi-Fi, which is why I'm able to talk to you tonight. If there is a delay, I do apologize. Sometimes we do have a little bit of traffic, not the greatest bandwidth, but I'm just thrilled to be able to communicate from such a remote area. And one of the reasons that we work with Orca Lab is that, true to their name, as you can see up through here, this really is an Orca Highway. So it allows us to collect data in 2 different regions of BC on a number of species of whales. And actually, I'm just going to move this because I think that might be getting in the way of you seeing the title. I'll go like
it looks good.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from these 2 different locations, what we're doing to collect the data, we do these daily scans. So from the north end of British Columbia to the south end of British Columbia at the same time every day on the hour from sunrise to sunset, with a large number of interns and volunteers worldwide that work with us. We do a scan from the deck for 20 minutes. And during that scan time, we're collecting all data on all marine mammals, but of course, especially whales, but as well on vessel traffic. And I'll talk a little bit more in a moment as to why we're also collecting data on vessels within the area. The other thing that we realized very quickly, I mean, it's one thing to collect all this visual data through land-based surveys as well as marine surveys, but we also realized that if you really want to understand the world of whales, you have to listen. So what we've done is we've developed partnerships with other NGOs that are doing underwater listening studies with whales, as well as coastal First Nation communities. And we've installed a number of hydrophones from one end of the coast of British Columbia right down to the other end. And just to help you understand what a hydrophone is, it really is like an underwater microphone, and it allows us access to the underwater acoustic world of whales. And at a couple of these locations where these hydrophone stations are located, they'll actually transmit all of these sounds from the ocean right back to the lab. So where I'm sitting right now, there's actually a speaker about 30 feet away from me, and I'm actually listening for the sounds of whales while I'm speaking to you right now. And these hydrophones can listen for miles and miles and miles. So if a whale is vocal, right away we know that there's whales in the area. And as I go into the presentation, I'll start to play some of these calls for you, so you can also listen a little bit. And just to give you an idea, so this fellow here, his name's Tom, and he is, my gosh, the work this man does is incredible. So he's helping us up and down the coast install these hydrophones. And what we do is we take this mooring here, and this yellow item on top is a cover that's over top of the hydrophone protecting it. And what we're about to do is take that mooring, we're about to put it on the boat, and we're about to back up. And offshore, we're going to deploy it about 60 to 80 feet beneath the surface. And then that hydrophone is connected to a cable. That cable is going to run all the way back up this intertidal area. And it's going to be connected to this land-based transmitter here. And then it's going to transmit all the sounds back to the lab where we can listen 24/7 to whales. So it's really a great way to understand habitat use, because whales are an extremely acoustic, vocal creature. All right, so the end game of all of this is what we're hoping to do with working with some other researchers, is to actually localize the calls of these whales. So what that means is that we'll actually be able to develop whale trails up and down the coast. So just like when you walk into the forest and you can see a trail that's been made by a deer or a wolf or a bear, I guess in Florida, it would be a crocodile. I'm not sure. But anyway, so those same trails you can see in a wooded or forested area, now we can develop these trails under the water with this hydrophone technology. So it's a really great advancement towards understanding how whales are using waters, not just in British Columbia, but worldwide. So let's start talking about these whales. I'm going to focus on humpbacks, orca, and fin whales, and I'm going to give you about 10 minutes on each of what I think the highlights are. And I'm hoping that from that information, you'll take something back home with you and go, wow, that's pretty interesting. So these are the 3 whales we study and see most often in our 2 research areas. And I'm going to start off with fin whales. And the reason I like this particular picture is when you look, this has been taken from a drone. And when you look down, you can see how long and slender this whale is. And that really works to their advantage because they really are one of the fastest large whales on the planet. These whales can grow up to be 70 feet long, which is the 2nd largest animal on the planet. And a fin whale is one of 15 is a species that's it's a baleen whale, one of 15 on the planet. And the reason they're referred to a baleen whale is that instead of teeth, they actually have baleen plates that hang from their mouth, top of their mouth, which you can see in this picture. So instead of eating with teeth, they actually filter their food through this baleen for very small little organisms. Fin whales, like I mentioned, 2nd largest animal on the planet. They're referred to as the greyhound of the sea because they can travel so fast. They can travel up to 15 to 20 miles sprinting like in a moment if they have to. And years ago, before pre-hunting, they were actually the most abundant whale on the planet. But for that reason, they were also the most whaled whale. So their numbers really did plummet during those years. Good luck, or a good part of that story is the numbers have really begun to return, at least in our particular area. So it's a great story to be able to tell when you see the recovery of a species on this coast or anywhere on this planet. One of the most spectacular things, though, about a fin whale is the way in which they feed. Now, a lot of baleen whales actually skim the surface. They'll swim through swarms and swarms of plankton. And you can see in this top picture here, they'll have these baleen plates exposed. And as they're swimming through, they'll just filter through for the plankton. But a fin whale and a couple of other baleen whales have a different form of feeding we refer to as lunge feeding or large water gulp feeding. And in order to do so, they have to have some really key adaptations, and a fin whale has been designed perfectly for this. So if you were to look underneath a fin whale, and you can see it in this picture, from the tip of their mouth all the way back to their navel, they have these large pleats, and these pleats allow that area to truly expand. And when they gulp a large area of water, that whole area will expand way, way, way out. And I have another picture that'll show it a little bit better. But what's really cool about this whale is the tongue. So in this picture to the right, you can see this red area here. So that's the tongue at rest. So that would be similar to how your tongue is resting in your mouth at this moment. But what happens is as this fin whale starts to open its mouth, the tongue is actually sucked back. And as the jaw goes further down, you can see in this bottom right-hand picture, this red area is actually the tongue. And what it's done is been sucked all the way back through this throat pouch. And it's actually allowing that pouch to open and expand even further. So right now, this whale's mouth is literally open at a 90-degree angle and it's filled with water. And what happens is that as that mouth starts to close, the tongue is going to force all that water back out through these baleen plates. And this allows them to feed on really nutrient-rich creatures like krill and small schooling fish. So they really have become this incredible feeding machine in our oceans. And yeah, I wish you could all get to see it, because you have to imagine this 70, 80-foot creature with its jaw expanded out like this, and it's underwater doing this type of feeding. But every once in a while, they do it on the surface as well. And it's really quite something to observe. So you can see fin whales ocean-wide. They are an offshore species. But there's a few exceptions to this. So the Gulf of St. Lawrence on the east coast of Canada, the Mediterranean, but also the Gulf of California and Mexico, there are fin whales that come close to shore. But one of the greatest exceptions actually happens to be where we're doing our work at the Fin Island Station along the north coast. And that area is actually a fjord system. And these fin whales are actually coming all the way into this fjord system because we happen to be working in this truly nutrient-rich area. And if you look at the hunting records going way back when they did hunt fin whales in the 1900s, you can see all of these little red dots are actually whales that were killed. But if you look a little bit closer, right here along the coast of BC, you can see all these little red dots, and that's actually showing us that historically, pre-whaling, we actually did have a lot of fin whales up in this fjord system in BC. And starting back in 2004, these whales actually started to come back, and we were fortunate enough to actually be there to document it. So in 2004, we documented about 2 fin whales. 2005, we had about 3 fin whales. And then every year that number just kept growing and growing. And we had the same fin whales coming back year after year. And now we have a population of well over 80 fin whales. So we are thrilled about this. And this is just zooming in so you can see the area a little bit closer, what's in this red circle here. So whenever I talk about a whale, I have to play a recording of what this whale sounds like underwater, because that's a really huge part of the work that we are doing. Now, this recording that you're going to listen to, we actually had to speed it up. And the reason for that is because fin whales actually vocalize way below our hearing. They tend to vocalize in around the 20 hertz area. So we can't hear those sounds, but because we have spectrograms at the lab, we can actually see when a whale is vocal, when it's a fin whale. And then what we can do is take it and speed it up and allow people like yourselves to actually listen to this in real time. And just to give you an understanding as to how strong this sound is, when these fin whales vocalize, these calls can travel across oceans. Because it's such a low frequency, the wave is very, very, it's not like one of these waves, it's a very little wave like this, and it can go on and literally travel and travel for very, very long distances. So I'm going to play this, and I really hope you can hear it, because it sounds soft, but it is, if you were in the water with this, it would be very, very strong. Can you hear that? Okay, good. So their calls are really like a pulse, but when you look at the pulse, you'll notice there's a real rhythm to it, and they can really change up those pulses. But for the most part, we really are listening to pulses. And we realized with these hydrophones that we had fin whales present even at times that we couldn't see them throughout the night. And as of course, during the winter hours when we have big storms going on, we could still document their presence by just listening or by recording their calls. So now I'm going to go into Orca, and which is great because I'm actually at Orca Lab right now. So I just think that's pretty special that I can talk to you from here. Along our coast, we actually have 3 species or 3 different ecotypes of orca, but I'm only going to speak to you about 2, and those are transients and residents. And as you can see in this picture, they look very much alike. And at first glance, you wouldn't really be able to tell which one you're actually observing. But the reality is their culture between these 2 ecotypes is extremely different. They feed, their diet is completely different, their family structure is very different, and their language is very different. And the other interesting thing about these whales is even though sometimes they'll come into this area at the same time, they have nothing to do with each other. So it's a very interesting relationship that they've had or that they don't have actually with each other. So I'll talk about the transients first. So the transients are referred to as the wolves of the sea. And the reason for that is because they really do hunt in packs. And quite often they go after sea lions, like you can see in this picture. They also go after gulls, porpoises, dolphins, a lot of other marine mammals. And once in a while, they will actually go after a very old, sick baleen whale, or sometimes the calf of a baleen whale. And I'll mention that a little bit later because I've got a really interesting picture to show you about that particular topic. Transient orca, they do live in family groups, but they will break away for large periods of time. So that family structure is quite fluid and does change a lot throughout. Their population in BC is doing very, very well. A lot of the transients that we see in BC, Canada, are also seen down along the coast, all the way down through the states, through Washington, and all the way down to California. So they do travel great distances, as well as up to Alaska. So that's why they're called transients. is because they tend to travel great distances all of the time. They also travel most of the time in silence, which is very different than the resident orca. And one of the reasons for this is because they don't want their prey to know they're in the area. So a lot of times they can be going back past the station here and we don't even know that they're here. We literally have to be looking for them at all times because they do travel in silence. But as soon as they make a kill, so whether they've just killed a sea lion or a Dall's porpoise or a dolphin, and while they're feeding, they are very vocal. So that's the time they open up and really start to communicate with each other. And I'm just going to play one of these recordings of one of their dinner times. And what I think is so interesting about that particular call type is it's very soft and very mellow and actually very soothing, right? So when you hear that call, you don't imagine this killer whale coming in and working like a pack of wolves and everything that they do. But they're really incredible hunters as well. When you do see them, a lot of times you'll have half the family really close into shore and the other half will be about 500 meters off, and they'll be traveling along, and all of a sudden, like a group of Dall's porpoises will accidentally get in the middle, and then all of a sudden it's just action immediately. They dive down and there's lots of full bodies coming out of the water, and the kill is usually very fast. But what's very interesting and I think very telling about their culture is that when a kill is made, they will actually share that Dall's porpoise, let's say, underwater. So one member of the family will actually be holding the animal, which is dead. They kill it right away while the other ones are feeding. Or if within that family group, you have a mother that has a calf or a couple of juveniles, the rest of the family will actually give it to her. So they're always thinking about each other, which I think is pretty incredible. And this is the picture I was mentioning. So we had this happen a couple of years ago where a group of transients came into the area, and we had a large group of humpback whales in the area at the same time. And they were trying to get through this very narrow channel. And what happened is that these humpbacks would not let these orca pass. And we realized afterwards why is because this female here, this is a female humpback whale. She actually had a calf that was in the area a couple of years prior. And one family of orca had gone after her calf. The calf had survived, but you could see these rake marks all over this poor little calf. So because transient orca will go after humpback calves, what we're seeing up and down the coast of BC is a lot of these humpbacks are actually forcing these orca out of the area just for that reason. So I thought I should share that with you because it's just such an incredible thing to see because, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have a lot of humpbacks along this coast. So this is like a new type of relationship that's developing between these two species. So resident orca. Resident orca behave so differently than the transients. Resident orca feed only on salmon. And what stands out the most about this particular population is their structure. And we have two different populations. We have the northern residents, which are this whole red area here along the coast of BC. And then the southern residents, which go all the way down into the States, is this yellow area. So I'll be talking mainly about the northerns because those are the whales that we spend the most time with. And the way that this this family structure is coordinated, I just got to move this for a second. Oh, I can't seem to move it. There we go. So the way this works is that the northern resident population is a population of about 250 whales. And within that population or that community, we have 3 clans. And each one of those clans actually has their own language. And within that clan, we have a number of pods. And each pod, even though they speak the same language, they have a different dialect with that language. And then within a pod, you have a matriline, which is the family group. And within that matriline, you will have females, their offspring. And what that means is that could be a great-great-grandmother, a grandmother, and a mother, all of their sons and all of their daughters, because the males actually never leave their mom. The daughters never leave their mom. But what can happen over time, if that family grows and grows and grows, is eventually one of these females with all of her offspring may leave their mom, but the boys never do. And I think that's really quite unique in the animal kingdom and quite fascinating. And what we believe is because they stay with their mom, that dialect of the mother, the oldest female, is being passed on to generation to generation. And that's why we have all these different languages and different dialects within this resident population. So what I'd like to do is play 3 examples, one from each clan. And even though for many of you, this may be the first time that you've heard or listened to an orca, I wouldn't be surprised if you can tell the difference. So I'll just play one after the other. And I'll just play the next one. And one more. We like to call that a whale kissing a hydrophone. That was intense. So just to really get across as to how strong this family bond is with resident orca. I'm not sure if any of you heard about this particular whale. This is back in 2017, a female northern resident by the name of Chilaquan. She gave birth to a little baby orca. And unfortunately, the orca only survived for about 30 minutes, but she just couldn't let it go. So she started to carry this orca. And after about 6 days, she'd already been carrying the orca for 6 days. Other members of her family actually helped her carry this baby because she just couldn't let it go. And it turned out that she carried this little one around with her for 17 days. And then finally she let it go. And we referred to this as a tour of grief because it was really heartbreaking to observe. But it also really brought it home for everybody in this community. And I think a lot of people heard about this, is that, you know, these whales truly have emotions and they're very intelligent beings, and that family means everything to them. And I just think it's something that it's really important to remember that. So that's one of the big takeaways when I talk about resident orcas, is that family structure. How highly social they are, how vocal they are. So those recordings that you heard, I mean, that's common. When they travel through this area, they can be vocal for hours and hours and hours. So they're very chatty, social creatures and very connected to one another, and as well to their habitat. And it allows this transmission of culture to occur between different family members. But also, I think there's a huge learning tool just here for us as well. And I'll end this part of the presentation just to talk about resident orca and fin whales, because there's a really interesting relationship that's developed between these two. So in this picture, this is actually a juvenile fin whale traveling with a resident family. And this whale, this large baleen whale, traveled with these resident orca for most of the day. But what's really interesting to acknowledge here is that if this fin whale had made the mistake of traveling with the transient orca, it would have become their meal, because they will chase and kill fin whales. But somehow or other, this fin whale knew the difference, and it knew that, hey, hanging out with these resident orca is actually a really good idea, especially when you remember that residents and transients don't get along. So it really was the safest place this resident, this fin whale could be with these resident orca. And humpback whales. So for me, for whatever reason, whether it's right or wrong to say it, this is my whale. I just don't know what it is about these particular whales, but they grabbed my heart when I was about 9 years old, and I've never let go. And I find them to be truly, truly fascinating. And when I first got into whale behavior and going to university and studying, I actually came to Orca Lab as an intern when I was very young. Because I was, of course, interested in orca as well, because there were no humpbacks along the coast of BC at that time. But it just so happened that when we went north, that was the time that all these humpbacks were coming back to the coast of BC, coming back to Alaska. So, you know, I was very lucky, actually, I think, to be a part of this, of this arrival of humpbacks back to the coast and to be able to document their arrival. So humpbacks are a migratory species. They travel 3,000 miles a year. So during our winter months, they will travel to Hawaii and Mexico, Baja, and sometimes some of them will go to Japan. And then in early spring, so right about around now, or even up to 6 weeks ago, they're starting to leave these warmer waters where they were calving and breeding, and they're starting to travel back up to along our coast from all the way from Washington, all the way up to Alaska. And the reason that they're coming to these cold waters is because this is where the feeding occurs. And one thing you have to keep in mind is that when they're in these warmer waters, they're actually not feeding. So I always like to talk about the fact that you have a female humpback. She's just given birth to her calf. She hasn't fed for months on end. She's nursing this calf, and now she has to travel around 3,000 miles to get to where the food is. So you can imagine that by the time she arrives, she's very, very hungry. One thing of interest that happened is that between the years of 2004 and 2018, we had identified up to close to 550 individual humpback whales that were coming back year after year to our research area. And of those 550 whales, at least 75 were known mothers. And we were seeing a nice, you know, calving rate that was occurring. It was increasing by about 7% per year. And then all of a sudden it just decreased. And we were down to, you know, at least a decrease of 13% per year. And what was interesting is we spoke to researchers in both Alaska and Hawaii, and they were documenting the same decrease that we were, and it was all around the same time in 2012. And just to give you an example, in 2017 and 2018 and 2019, we were seeing an average of maybe 1 or 2 calves. And then all of a sudden last year in 2020, we had 16 known females suddenly arrive back with calves again. So we don't quite know what happened. We think it could have been something to do with climate change. Something occurred that had stopped these whales from either going full term or making it up to our area with their little calf. But the great news is that their numbers seem to be back on target. So we're pretty happy about that. One thing to remember though, culturally, humpbacks are very different than orca. So a humpback with her calf, that relationship only lasts for 1 year. So that mother only has 1 year to teach that calf everything it needs to learn to survive, because the year after that, that little one is all on its own. Every whale that comes into our area, we take a picture of that whale. So a fluke is like a fingerprint to us. So over years, that's how we know how many whales we have. We know who the females are, and we're beginning to understand better and better the social structure of this population. And the way that we ID a whale from a picture is that we'll look at the trailing edge. So all these little bumps here, and as well, all the different white and black markings that you can see, what the tip looks like, and of course the shape of this center notch here. And what can happen over time is that we end up with this variety of whale tails. And from this picture, you can see some are very, very black, some are black and white, some are very, very white. So truly, every single fluke really is like a fingerprint to us, and it allows us to document each individual and the different personalities that these whales have. And that comes to our ability to now understand the sociality and the culture of this particular whale. And it's interesting, you know, if you go back in time, it was actually believed that these humpback whales were quite solitary creatures. And we now know this is not true. We have some humpback whales that show bonds that have lasted over 15 years now. And that bond is not through family. That bond doesn't mean that they're related to each other. We don't think it does. One of the things that we're starting to do is a lot of genetic work, but I'll talk about that in just a second. One of the interesting things we've seen, though, is that foraging behavior really does seem to document these social bonds that occur between whales in our particular area anyway. And one of the most amazing things I've ever witnessed is when humpback whales bubble net feed. And what's interesting is that we've had the same 15 whales. If we go back to 2004, it was the same 15 whales were always bubble net feeding together in a group. And when these whales bubble net feed, they really do work as a team. You know, everybody has their own role. And what they'll do is they'll dive down one after the other underneath a school of herring. And when they get underneath that school of herring, they start to do what we call a spiral dance as they start to blow bubbles, and they move in this spiral motion. And what that spiral motion is doing is causing this net of bubbles. And of course, we all know what bubbles do is they start to rise. So as these bubbles are rising and carrying all these fish up towards the surface, there's going to be one or two humpbacks at the bottom of this that starts to vocalize. And these vocalizations are actually causing these fish to get into a tighter ball and get further into this net, which is perfect because when they break the surface with these large gaping mouths, all this fish is right there for them. So the mouth is wide open, they gulp this water, similar to what I described with the fin whale, and that tongue is gonna push all of the water out through these baleen, the baleen at the top of their mouth. So the tongue is going to push all the water through that baleen, but the baleen is going to trap all that schooling fish. And the one fish species that these humpbacks love to feed on is herring, so schools of herring. And I will play the bubble net feeding call for you. But one thing I just want to mention, so back in 2004, 2005, we had about 15 whales that we saw that were bubble net feeding, but this behavior is actually getting passed on to other members within the community. So they're actually learning this technique from each other. And now we've documented over 200 humpback whales bubble net feeding. And that behavior is actually making its way down the coast of BC. Where I am right now, there's also humpback whales here, but they don't bubble net feed. They haven't, that transmission hasn't occurred here, but I'm sure in due time, it absolutely will. And this is what a bubble net feeding call sounds like. Stop it there. It actually goes on for about 2 or 3 minutes. And the length of that call is actually dependent on the size of the group. And of course, how deep down they go. And that particular sound, sometimes we are listening to that and recording it on these hydrophone stations, sometimes from the minute the sun comes up until the sun goes down. So they can bubble net feed all day long during the summer months up here. So just a little bit about this genetic work that we're doing. So we have a lovely PhD student by the name of Aideen, and what she's come up with is this idea of flying drones through blow. And when the drone goes through the blow, she's actually able to collect little samples of from the blow, and she takes that and she analyzes it, And now with her PhD, she's actually coming up with some really good information on whether or not these whales are related to each other, where they're migrating from. And she's really just getting started, but I just think it's incredible because it's a way to collect a DNA sample without having a huge impact on the whale. And that's a real important thing to the work that we're doing, is trying to find out as much as we can, but to also show great respect towards the whales themselves. And something else you may have heard of lately, it's called eDNA. And I think this is fascinating because you can actually collect DNA from water samples. So now during marine surveys, we actually go out and we collect large amounts of water, or if a whale dives and they leave this massive footprint, we can actually just collect the water samples and get DNA from that sample. But you can also do this with fish, with sea lions, with all kinds of different species within our oceans. So it's a great new technique. And if you haven't heard about it, you'll probably hear more about it as the years go by. One thing I want to end the presentation on is just talk a little bit about the importance of sound to whales. So because we have these listening devices up and down the coast, what we've become very aware of is the amount of boat noise that we're listening to. So of course, when I hear boat noise, I can just go and turn it down. But when these whales hear boat noise, they cannot. And because they're an acoustic creature, they literally use sound like we use our eyesight. Sound is so important to their survival. They use sound to communicate with each other between family members. They use sound to locate their prey. They use sound to navigate absolutely everything. So they're incredibly dependent on a quiet ocean, but unfortunately worldwide, that's not the case. And I just want to play you a little example of something here. So as you're listening to this, if you can hear it properly, just see if you can actually hear the whale in the background. So now I'm going to play the same recording, but we've taken the boat noise out, and just listen to this. So there was actually a family of orca trying to communicate with each other through all that boat noise. And we call that call masking, because it was probably very, very difficult for them to do so. So it really is a worldwide situation that we're trying to understand better and better. The other thing that we are encountering, which is really heart-wrenching, and that is especially with humpback whales getting entangled in fishing gear. And this is a slow, terrible death for any whale to have to go through. So we're trying to work with other organizations. We have a couple of people trained along the coast of BC, especially working with coastal First Nations, that if a whale is entangled, that we have this network of people that can try and help us disentangle the whale. The other thing you see a lot of in BC are these big signs that says, see a blow, go slow. And it really does work. So if someone sees a blow or in the distance or is able to communicate over the VHF radio, we're really trying to slow boaters down and think about the reality that we have a high density of whales in the area. And one of the reasons for this is, of course, whales are being struck. So this whale to the left, we never did see this whale again, and it was a pretty horrific injury. This injury to the right, not as bad, and this whale did survive actually quite well. The whale in the bottom here is an incredible story. Her name is Habit, and this is you can see the size of prop that must have hit this poor whale, and it's incredible she survived. So she encountered, or this injury occurred back in 2015. She had been a reproductive female in those days, and she showed up in 2015 with this injury, and we did not think she would survive. But we saw her again last year. Actually, this picture was taken last year, and she's done incredibly well. Even though she no longer calves, she actually hangs out with other mothers, and she'll look after their calf while the mother is feeding at depth. So she's still playing a huge role within her community. And one of the projects we're working on now with drones is getting pictures from the air, as you can see in the bottom picture here, getting pictures from the air and looking for any scar tissue or indication that a whale's either been struck by a vessel or was once entangled in a net, so we can get a better handle on how much of an issue this actually is coast-wide. And this is what I like. I always like to end a presentation on this note. What I'd like to do is just play a minute of a humpback whale song. And when you listen to this song, you truly understand what an acoustic creature whales are, and their ability to produce sounds that even to our ear is truly, truly magical. And I'm going to play this just for 1 minute as a way to leave you on a positive note of how incredible these creatures are. And of course, all this incredible work is being completed by so many different people that have helped us over the years, from researchers from around the world, from interns to students to volunteers. In the middle here is my dog, Cohen, who really does believe he's a whale researcher. And, you know, I really have to mention that it is the Save Our Seas that has helped us from the get-go. They've been helping us out now for well over a decade, and it really is their passion towards the work that we're doing, and the passion towards the work that they're doing that has made all of this possible. But I also like to mention the Gitga'at First Nation, because that's actually where we built our research station. And 20 years ago, when we landed in their territory, they not only gave us permission to do work, but they also shared their local knowledge with us, and none of this would have been possible without their permission to do work within their territory. And I also want to mention the Donner Canadian Foundation and Fisheries and Oceans Canada, because they've also been some long-term supporters, and of course people like yourselves that are listening to all of this today. I just really think that worldwide, if we listen and talk and communicate, you know, that we have a better chance of protecting this incredible planet. And if you want to find out more about us or what the work that we're doing, I'll just leave this little thank you to all of you. And our website is bcwhales.org or orcalab.org. And of course, you can visit us on Facebook or Instagram and all of that. So thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much for the virtual journey to, well, first of all, the virtual journey to what I think is one of the most gorgeous parts of our continent, and just the sounds and the visuals of this, and whales are just so fascinating, and the concerns for what that is. It's something I think about every time I go to the beach, really. And if I go to the beach and sit on the sand and listen to the waves crashing, I can hear the waves crashing. If I go swimming and I go underwater, all I can hear are the boats that are miles away on the horizon. And I, you know, wonder how that affects the whales, and wonder, just to start, we have some good questions from the audience, but just to start, is there something, I'm fascinated by the hydrophones you were talking about. As the sound engineer of me has a million questions. I don't want to bore everybody with that, but just, so talk about that for a second, with the whale's relationship and reaction to anthropogenic noises like boats and any other machinery in the water. Is there some kind of adaptation that the whales make because of their different frequency ranges that allows that to maybe get around the ship noise sometimes, or does it affect certain types of whales more than others?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. Definitely, it depends on the behavior. So when you have a group of resident orca that are spread out foraging on salmon, of course, they're highly affected if there's a boat going through the area, because they can't communicate with each other. You know, a lot of times when one member catches a fish, generally what they do is they communicate, and they will all come in and share that fish. With the transient orca that are feeding on marine mammals, if there's a lot of boat noise in the area, then they can't hear the cues that different animals will make, like splashing, or if they're vocalizing, they actually won't be able to hear that. So they don't even know that their prey is in the area. Humpbacks, when they're bubble net feeding, we haven't noticed a huge response from them to boat noise as of yet, but that's some work that we're still working on. But fin whales, they are the whale that is actually struck most often by ships for whatever reason, and we're still trying to figure that out. So one of the reasons that we are doing this work up and down the coast is because we want to compare different habitats, different whale behaviors, different whale populations to try to better understand what that actual impact is and what their threshold is, meaning at what level does boat noise truly have an impact on their ability to survive and feed and communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, with the fin whales frequency range being so low and traveling across the whole ocean, I'm sure that does something, but maybe with the higher frequency whale, that's, I mean, I'm so glad that you're doing that. And I always love hearing about it when you come and join us. We're going to get to a few questions from the audience. Plenty of time if you have any questions. Now's your chance to get some insight directly from Janie Ray here. We're going to start with a question, basic question from Joyce, who's asking, what's the best time of year to see whales where you are, and where could she go to see them for herself?
So the best place to see orca is where I am right now, which is an area called Johnson Strait, which is the top end of Vancouver Island. And the best time to see them is August, but you can see them June, July, August, September, but the peak is definitely August, late July, all of August, early September. To see humpback whales, you'd have to go up towards Prince Rupert, and that would be starting right about now, all the way until September.
Question from Alex and Andrew asking, will orcas hunt sperm whale or any other type of whale?
Yes, they will. Yeah. So there's actually, if you were to Google it, I wish I had a picture of it. So what a group of female sperm whales will do if they have calves is that they'll actually form a circle around that calf or any calves that are in the area when transient orcas come into the area. And truly do Google it, because it's just a fascinating technique that they use to protect their young.
Interesting. Here's a question from Vanessa asking, is the bonding period between the mother and calf dependent on how fast the calf can learn the skills they need to survive?
So that bonding that happens between mother and calf, from what we know, it generally lasts a year, but every once in a while we'll have a mother and calf that spend 2 years together. And that's why that question is so interesting to me, is because maybe that mother recognizes that that calf, for whatever reason, needs a little more time to understand the skills it's going to need to survive. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
Yeah, wondering what I mean, the whales are so intelligent. Wondering what that instinct is on like a parental level.
That's right. Yeah.
Fascinating to think about. Here's one from Harry asking, depending on what type of whale using their senses for feeding or avoiding danger, is there different ranges for sight or smell, or different, I guess he's asking different roles for sight and smell in feeding or avoiding hazards? Yeah,
so we assume that, for example, like a fin whale that has a very low frequency call, that they have the ability to also hear calls from other whales from a great distance away. But does that then hinder their ability to, let's say, hear the frequency of a higher frequency orca or a higher frequency vessel? So these are questions that we're still trying to answer. I don't know if I'm answering that question quite properly, but definitely, you know, different senses, different environments, different whales have different adaptations that allow them to survive in different areas. Does that answer it? Or I'm not sure if I got that completely.
I believe so. I think that's kind of what we're getting at, is this relationship of the different senses being used there. There was another question in here about just the species of whale that you study in their relationship to the food chain or the food web, and what their, you know, if the top of the food chain isn't there. This is from Harry again asking, you know, to his understanding, the top of the food chain wasn't there, would dramatically change the ecosystem. So as you've seen, I guess, these populations of whale species you study change over the years, how have you noticed that changing the overall ecosystem around you?
Yeah, so with like with humpbacks and fin whales, this is truly fascinating to me. So, of course, years ago we were wondering, like when the planet was just filled with all these massive, huge whales, you know, how did that how could they feed? Like, how did they not eat up and gulp up all the krill and all the herring? Well, it turns out two things. One is that whale poo actually feeds what they feed on. There's a huge nutrient to the ocean. So when a whale, when you have all these whales in an area and you know they're defecating on a regular basis, well, what happens is all of that is nutrient rich, and it's actually feeding the krill and the plankton, which is feeding the smaller fish, which is feeding the larger fish, and all the way up the food chain. So in reality, lots of whales mean you have a very healthy, rich ecosystem. And also when they do die, their body actually will sink to the bottom, and it produces all these nutrients for a lot of critters very deep down that normally wouldn't have access. And the third thing is that when they're feeding, whether they're feeding on fish or krill or whatever, they're bringing a lot of this food up to the surface, which is allowing other creatures, like a lot of bird life, you'll notice, are around whales when they're feeding. So they play a huge role in any ecosystem, and they improve that ecosystem by being present. They are very important.
Yeah, I would imagine for any any residents of an ecosystem, it's hard to ignore the whales.
Yeah, exactly.
So, one from Aaliyah asking, do hunchback and humpback get along? Not sure what we're getting at there.
Oh, hunchback and humpback. I think that's a, I think they do, yes.
Let's just assume so. We got one, there's another good one from Alex and Andrew here asking, will blobfish eat the dead whales? Or what kind of, when a whale sinks to the bottom, you have any insight on what kind of populations that's feeding?
Yeah, I don't actually know the specific names of what's feeding. I mean, I know it would be a lot of crabs and a lot of crustaceans that would be feeding on them, but there would be some other fish species, but I don't know offhand actually, so I apologize for that.
That's okay. I think, as we learn in science, I'm not sure, but I'm sure somebody does. Is
Yeah.
Acceptable answer. Good one from Eli here, and also gotten a couple questions here. Eli asking about prehistoric whales, and you know, what's the lineage, you know, I guess between the whales that you study and you know, any knowledge you have of like maybe the first whales, or how whales kind of came about.
Yeah, well, the theory is that they were land creatures. So they looked something like a hoofed animal, like they looked like a hoofed animal, which we believe evolved into the baleen whales. And then there was also one that looked more like a wolf-like animal. And both of these creatures actually made their way into the water and eventually became what we call cetaceans, or whales and dolphins and porpoises. So that's what the natural history or the evolution of a whale is, from looking at the records. And, you know, I always like to use the analogy of a hippopotamus, because when we look at hippos, you know, they right now are considered a terrestrial creature. But, you know, if we go ahead in time, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually they become a marine mammal, because they love to be in the water almost all of the time. I think that's a great creature to look at to understand how an animal can change over time.
Yeah, I have read some, and recently I read that hippopotamus and modern whales have a common ancestor.
Yeah.
Not too, I mean, on the geologic time scale, not too far back, but dozens of millions of years ago for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to, I think, in that time period, but that is what it would be. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Well, here's a good, we've got a few minutes left if you have any more questions. Here's a great one here. I apologize in advance if I get your name wrong. Tiziana is asking, how can people help whales from becoming endangered, or, you know, endangered again? Or what are some ways for just folks around town to help get involved and do something to help whale populations?
So, you know, I always like to go to what can we actually really do. And I think what it comes down to is protecting the ocean. And I know we're all talking about plastics and microplastics, but I think plastic is probably one of the number one killers of our ocean at this time. So just thinking about if there's something you can use instead of plastic, I think that's something we can all do to help the planet and especially help the oceans. If you watch any of these documentaries on what's occurring out there, and to bring awareness to that, I think is really, really important. But I think as well, just the take home is talking about how, when it comes to whales specifically, is remembering that these are very intelligent, emotional beings, and that they really do care about each other. And I think if we can relate to them in that way, then we think more about protecting them. So passing it on to your friends and your buddies and, people that you're communicating with, just, that it would be a lonely ocean without whales, but it really is looking at the bigger picture. And this whole marine ecosystem is very dependent on itself and on us to do what we can. And I always just come down to the plastics right now, because I think it's really important that we get a handle on that.
Absolutely. In a direct, so I always like to think awareness is kind of the first step to helping anything, and just kind of knowing
it really is.
What your actions are leading to, both, personally and collectively. But that's great insight and a great note to wrap things up on. We are just about out of time. So I would love to thank all of you for tuning in tonight. I'd love to thank Janie Ray, BC Whales, for joining us from a wonderful location and a lot of great information. Thank you for joining us again, returning Save Our Seas speaker series. Be sure to go to bcwhales.org to check out all the great work that Janie and her team are doing up in the Pacific Northwest. And tune in to future events here. We have some a great lineup from our Save Our Seas Distinguished Speaker Series next month in June. I believe it's June 3rd. We'll be talking to Catherine Mcdonald about some work that she's doing conservation in the Caribbean around the islands there. And a great lineup beyond that every month, and some good stuff coming up here at the museum. This Saturday, we have our 10th annual Asian Pacific American Heritage Celebration with some wonderful performances from Ronin Taiko Japanese Drumming Troupe, Joe Keat Martial Arts, and array of music and dancing from Polynesian Proud Productions. Next Saturday, May 15th, is our Eye of the Storm event, getting ready for hurricane season. It's going to be free admission here at the museum. So definitely come on out to that. Then the weekend after that, we're opening up our new exhibit, Here Be Dragons. And then it'll be time in early June for our next Save Our Seas Distinguished Speaker Series event. And then until then, we have some great programs, including a art contest sponsored by our friends at the Extra Catch, where if you go to the beach or go to the park or even just collect things that you're using, plastic especially, collect those items, make some art out of it, send us a picture, go to our website for information. You could win some great prizes, including a full-size paddleboard, gift certificates to BC Surf and Sport. And all you have to do is, again, you would be helping the whales also collect your plastic, collect your debris out of the ocean, and divert it from that and turn it into something special. So always stay tuned to our website for the great programming we have coming up. But again, thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you once again to Janie Ray, who we always love having for that great presentation. And thank you to the Save Our Seas Foundation for making this possible. I'm Brady Newbill at the Museum of Discovery and Science, signing off. Everybody have a lovely night, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.